Hello everyone, this is Dartt. I've had a busy couple of days, so I'm late getting this out, but October 14th, there was a developer Q&A featuring community manager Josh Allen and newly appointed World of Warcraft game director Ian Hazzikostas. Apparently Ian is now in charge of World of Warcraft. The whole thing. Yeah, that happened. I'd say it was an easy call, though, given how much he's been the public face of the game lately, and with Chris Metzen recently retiring. Chris Metzen, of course, having done the voice acting for Ragnaros, Thrall, and King Varian Wrynn. Thrall and Varian have been written out of the story with the launch of Legion. There's lots of new information in this Q&A, so let's jump right in. First question. Are you and the team happy with where classes have ended up after the initial balance tuning pass? Can we expect to see more before 7.1? Ian's response was that they were happier. There's more work to do and it's an ongoing process. There are likely to be more tweaks before and after. The problem is that the numbers are dynamic and they're using the data sets from actual gameplay, and that varies from week to week as people start playing the flavor of the month specs. What can be done to make Hunter Barrage less annoying, e.g. pulling mobs directly above you? Otherwise great talent, but too random. They're considering a couple of different changes. One is to maybe change Barrage to make it the bottom half of a half cone rather than a full frontal cone effect. Also, the other choices in that talent row aren't as competitive, so it might be addressed that way. What can be done to curb the heavy RNG element in regards to legendaries that's the cause of a lot of frustration? The problem is that the developers wanted a high degree of excitement when they were obtained from friends, guildmates, etc., and the rarity factor goes hand in hand with this. There's no excitement to either a deterministic or currency-based way of obtaining a legendary item. The goal is to have legendaries complement artifact power as a potential reward for World Quest caches, Mythic Plus caches, and the like. What are your plans with legendaries for people who haven't gotten one, or have gotten one notably subpar for their class? The answer here is, if you haven't gotten one, keep playing the game and doing what you can to obtain one. Of course, you may want one that impacts your role the most, so, for example, a legendary that increases your DPS, if that's what you do. Don't discount the ones you don't immediately want, because you will come across situations where these will be lifesavers or give you options that you wouldn't have had otherwise. They are tools for dealing with game content, and the more you have, the better equipped you'll be in Legion. Also, some of these legendaries may be retuned or redesigned, so it is possible that undervalued or underpowered legendaries may become more valuable down the road. Is the current design of hardcore for casual players and casual for hardcore players intended? That is to say, Mythic cleared day one. Yes, the top guilds cleared Mythic on day one, but the process behind that was anything but what you would call casual. Mythic Xavius is not tuned the way the developers really wanted, otherwise they're happy with the rest of the raid bosses. Xavius, Ian thinks, is just undertuned. In a perfect world, it would have been more of a 2-day boss requiring 80 to 100 attempts. They really weren't trying to make a huge wall-style raid boss, though. This is just the first taste. They've got Trial of Valor, Nighthold, and more to follow. They really wanted Emerald Nightmare to serve as an intro to raiding. Right now, there's still only about a dozen guilds that have cleared Emerald Nightmare on Mythic, with people progressing through on higher difficulties, and that's where the dev team thinks things should be, and they're happy. They may want to find ways to de-incentivize split character farming, or at least curb that so there's not a huge disparity between what is possible for the hardest of the hardcore guilds and everyone else. The trick is not to penalize players in other situations who may want to run the same raid on multiple characters for whatever reason. What is the design intent behind Prot Warriors, and why was the Rage from Damage Taken model brought back? The dev team wanted to cut back on scale to difficulty tank abilities that would make them unkillable or invincible in some circumstances. While in a high difficulty raid setting, the warrior may have had nearly infinite rage, at lower difficulties or in a solo setting, the warrior may have to do a bit more resource management where rage is concerned, but they still have good survivability and are interesting to play. Will the level 100 Shadow Priest talent redesign be in 7.1 or later? Not in 7.1, but not long after that. There are problems with Surrender to Madness, and it's hampering the class with regards to PvE and raiding in particular. The dev team is looking for ways to grant options that don't involve the priest needing a res after every instance boss. Also, surrender deaths do not incur a 5-second penalty in Mythic Plus as a recent fix. So there's that. Will secondary stat values be tuned? Feel like item levels are now in most cases nothing but a budgeting portrayal. Ian said that's one of his few regrets with the design side of Legion, and that least desirable secondary stats rendering your gear worthless is something that needs improvement. However, they want to be careful about improving this because they don't want players to feel that the choices they've made or gems and enchants they've purchased and used are now meaningless. One thing is that secondary stats were given a lot higher weight in relation to primary stats, so right now secondary stat weights are very pronounced. The goal is to have a purely high item level drive upgrades, and that's just not the case yet. Any chance of reducing the crafting material requirements to alleviate the very onerous cost of optimizing for raids in 7.1? A Blood of Sargeras trader will be introduced, and they want to see how that works before taking further action. That, along with new recipes like a Blood of Sargeras based DPS potion that lasts 60 seconds. Parts of the problem are that people abandoned their gathering professions in Warlords because they were meaningless, and also that profession materials were so readily abundant that prices on these were at the lowest point ever. Another thing is that it may require a change in thinking on the part of raid leaders, where in Warlords it was expected that you flask up pre-pot on every pull, whether it's progression or not, and gem and enchant everything optimally. Now you may have to exercise a little discretion. On the very first pull, is that potion going to tip the scales and allow you to down the boss? Or should you wait until your raid is right there and needs a little something extra? It's a complex answer, and costs right now are the highest they will be and will decline as the expansion continues to play out. The devs will be keeping a close eye on this. With Mythic Plus being a huge part of Legion, are there any plans to help specs that don't have strong, consistent AoE so they can partake in higher keystones? Ian said, if the answer is, can all specs have strong, consistent AoE? Then no. The devs want there to be areas of strength and weakness within classes. The idea is to put in affixes that speak to various spec strengths, then homogenize everything. Rather than homogenize everything. Could rewards from world quests, not caches, adjust according to loot spec? Would be really nice for focused gearing. Ian said there's 2 reasons it doesn't work that way. First, the world quest map is static, and it would be highly annoying if it changed every time you switched specs. Also, it serves as a safer way to gain gear for an off-spec without changing your loot spec. And this can encourage people to try specs they might not have. If they receive relics for an unused artifact weapon, that would be more of an incentive than if they were constantly receiving useless relics for their main artifact weapon. How does bad luck protection for legendaries work? Right now, I feel like the system is time-based only. Doesn't reward player activity. There is no time component. If you receive a legendary, it's mostly pure luck. If you log off and don't play for a month, you're not any more likely to receive a legendary than if you'd played. The more things you can do to gain a legendary, the more likely you are to gain one. And that's it. There was one minor bug that slightly skewed the distribution for people who already had one legendary, but that affected perhaps 1% of those players. It wasn't a very widespread thing. It's been fixed, and that's the only real bug worth mentioning. The problem is macro, not micro. It is statistically possible if 10 million people are all playing and killing bosses, clearing world quests, doing PvP and the like, that someone might get 3 legendaries in one day. It's not likely, but it is possible. With that many people, that possibility can quickly become a certainty. It's the same probability as winning the lottery, but it does exist. When will the action cam come back? I love the extra immersion it brought to the game. 7.1. You can actually try it out now in the PTR. It had to be disabled to add safeguards and the like to keep it from popping up when it wasn't wanted. Will there be any punishment for leaving Mythic Plus dungeon runs? Having someone drop out before completion is very frustrating, but there's no real way to punish this that doesn't open the system up to even worse abuse. The ability to swap in other people allows the Keystone owner to kick everyone out and invite friends, or to sell runs. If there was a way to reimburse your Keystone or recharge it, you could either Alt F4 if something bad happened. The best protection is simply to run them with friends or with people you trust. As always, there are things in real life that may happen, and the last thing the devs want is to punish people for what could potentially be a real-life issue. Will there be a system in place where we can move all artifact power to another weapon? Can't even properly test other specs now. Ian said there is no plans to do that. Artifact knowledge is intended to address this and allow you to develop other specs. Ask Mr. Robot had a good blog that showed that even if you developed a spec from scratch, you were literally only a few days behind your primary spec. It was never meant to be a transferable resource. Is artifact knowledge working as hoped? Any plans to adjust research rates or make account server-wide? The devs are happy with how that's playing out. It's an incentive for people to invest as much time as possible, but with diminishing returns for people who play a ton. The research work order times will shorten to accommodate people who come in late or alts. Down the road, there may be a more drastic catch-up mechanic that advances you to research level 10 automatically, but that's a ways away. What is the logic behind gating some hidden appearances behind massive RNG time walls, while others are literally vendor items? It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. The devs didn't want a single approach to this. For example, the Beastmaster hidden appearance being on a vendor was to address concerns that people may not have necessarily wanted to use a gun. But the flip side is there's no prestige in having a gimme hidden appearance. But if you see her are an outlaw rogue that has the Thunder Fury variant, it's a cool thing because of the time and effort spent. The rarer it is, the harder it is to get, the more people are going to want it. Will Karazhan also be an account-wide unlock? Ian actually wasn't sure, but it said he felt like it should be. Archway and Court of Stars will be made account-wide, and Karazhan is another attunement that should be that way. The attunement is there to tell a story, and after the story is told, there's not a lot of value to repeating that process. Can we please get something other than gold for non-loot bonus rolls? Even a slight amount of artifact power would be better. The developers would like to, but the failure condition defaulting to gold was hard-coded into the process. That's something that the dev team is going to have to work towards improving. They realize that getting a couple of dozen gold after downing a hard boss feels insulting. World quests were supposed to have a large variety and that we would not see many of the same ones often, but I found since launch that we do see many of the same ones repeated quite frequently. Is this going to be addressed? Ian said the problem is with the World Quest scheduler. If a World Quest comes up that hasn't been seen in 3 weeks, but there's already one there, it gets overridden. So it keeps trying, and eventually it falls back to whatever isn't going to cause a conflict. Which is why you spend so much time catching squirrels in Val'sharah. Once an area is better set up to handle multiple quests in the same location, this will sort itself out. Lots of class balance issues with mechanics problems, e.g. Balance Druid, impacting raid and Mythic Plus desirability. What plans for 7.1? Overlaps with the earlier question about sustained AoE. The devs will be looking to tweak to preserve desirability. They want class strengths preserved. The statement, bring the player, not the class, is something that got overcorrected for, and the devs want to see a little more bring the class, not the player. The experience right now is best served by there being a reason to include different classes and specs, not necessarily who has the longest bar on the meter. It's a social game, and including people you wouldn't ordinarily helps drive the social aspect. With the higher maximum item level in Trial of Valor, will the maximum Mythic Plus item level you can reliably get also be increased? No plans to do that right now for Trial of Valor, since it would be a 5 item level bump and the item level ceiling is 895. When Nighthold comes out and overall better gear is available, then yes, you'll probably be able to get better items from Mythic Plus 11 or better, and the cap will go up a couple of tiers. Ursoc's Rending Paw and several other Emerald Nightmare raid trinkets are severely undertuned. Is this being looked into? Ian simply says yes. They are very interested in the data for proc effects that move around or have complex interactions, and they will be making some adjustments. Can you comment on the current state of Fury? Our single target damage isn't really competitive enough that we have the burden of 30% extra damage taken during Enrage. Some improvements are coming in 7.1 for Fury. Numbers, tweaks, damage increases across the board. The base extra damage will be lowered from 30% to 20%. The devs have heard the feedback, and to be fair, they've been hearing it since beta and should have listened then, but they wanted to be certain. That extra damage can be very frustrating because it's beyond your control, and going over your logs, it's going to be worse because you're going to look and see that a damage spike coupled with your enrage effectively killed you. There will be a band-aid, but Ian said he'd prefer a redesign to preserve the Berserker fantasy without situationally killing the entire specialization on a given encounter. Why must relics be destroyed? Very easy to mess up if you're not up to speed on theorycraft or you get bad advice. The short answer is that developers want to avoid an overly complicated new talent system that would come from this. Swapping relics out based on whatever situation you're in. Picking your spec and talents should already fill that need. If you're not sure, you can keep it in your bags, but once you commit to it, that's it. Last question. Patch 7.1 release date. Really soon. October 25th. Return to Karazhan goes live. Trial of Valor will not be active immediately. The current plan is to open that 2 weeks after the patch releases. They don't want that to overlap BlizzCon. No one wants to do competitive rating during BlizzCon. Also, from the company standpoint, they just don't have time to do BlizzCon and watch over a new content release. So, second week of November for Trial of Valor, and that would be Tuesday the 8th. Put your calendars away, I checked for you. That's everything from the Q&A. I really enjoy reading your comments, so please leave those below. Hit that like button if this is preferable to spending an hour or more sitting through the live stream. Share this if you need to, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't. Once again, this is Dartt. Good luck, have fun, see you in Karazhan.